Welcome to Real GM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg. Got a great show for you today. Matt Moore from the Action Network is joining me for our monthly tiers. We're going to hit every team and talk about them based on how they are performing versus expectations coming into the season. Let's jump in. Matt Moore from the Action Network is here. Welcome back to Real GM Radio.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to be back.
Of course. So one of the recent staples of Real GM Radio when it was hosted by Danny LaRue were the monthly tiers. He would have you on. You guys would break up and rank the league by theme. So I just wanted to keep doing that. And we're going to do that today. So for our tiers this time, I was thinking we could base them off of expectations. You've prepared your tiers. I have mine. I think they're going to be a little bit different in some ways, but I want to start with yours. I kind of want to just base the whole show off of yours. Let's just jump right in. What's your first tier?
All right, so the first tier is, this is so much fun! Like, these teams are just having a blast. Look how great life can be. I've got the Rockets, the Cavaliers, the Lakers, and the Golden State Warriors. All of those teams I feel like are at least above expectation and are like, hey, things are going really well for us.
I had pretty much the same group in mine. Except you have one team that I didn't have, and that's the Lakers. I had them just like a tier below. But you know what? If we want to sing the Lakers' praises, I feel like not enough people are positive on the Lakers, so we can be here. So of these teams, I actually want to start with the Rockets. They have been so much fun. I love the name of this tier because it's exactly right. And offensively, it's fun because it's almost like a mixed bag. Like, you're never really sure if it's going to be like an Alperen Şengün triple-double night, or if it's going to be one of these three-point shooting nights where they just seem to, everybody kind of has it falling, or is it going to be like the Jalen Green roller coaster ride? Like, what's it going to be? And then defensively, they are a joy. They are an absolute joy to watch. And for me, it starts with Tari Eason and Amen Thompson. Like, those, what do they call them? Like the
Terror Twins. I was
Terror
just going
Twins.
to reference that. A great announced job there of nicknaming them the Terror Twins.
It's a great nickname, man. And I'm like jealous I didn't come up with it, even though like the Rockets aren't my domain. But I forgot how much I love watching Tari Eason play defense, because he was basically out all of last year. He played like a handful of games. Comes back and his arms are long. He's athletic. He's got great instincts. And then you just pair him with Amen Thompson, who was a rookie last year, so we didn't really see them together. And those two guys on the court are horrifying to play. So the nickname is apt.
Yeah, I mean, they're just Amen is so good at anticipating angles. Like, that's like a very subtle thing that he's really good at, where I'm not just talking about passing angles, but like he'll read screens very well and understand where to get to and anticipate. Easton makes so many plays that are just seem absolutely huge, and then helps them get out in transition to help out the offense. Like, it's interesting to me that Jalen Green has had some very big nights, but the overall numbers are still like, oh, like you look at his shooting numbers and you're like, oh, but like if they can get that every now and again, that helps them. They want more consistency, but that helps. I think Şengün's best days this season are still very much ahead of him. Dillon Brooks has been amazing for them. Like, the on-off stuff is great. He hits timely three-pointers. And like, some of this is like, is this going to last the whole season? Probably not. But you know what? It's going to get them off to a great start, and that often boosts you through the rest of the season, especially when you look at it and you say, like, look, Alperen Şengün hasn't even been great yet. So if Alperen, kind of settles in and he has a strong month, they have a lot of ways for them to get to 45 plus wins, 50 wins, and be an outright playoff team. And if they're a playoff team, that's going to mess up a bunch of stuff in the Western Conference, because that's like a spot that I think a lot of teams thought would be available. And I just think it's been phenomenal. Ime Udoka's defense is obviously always going to be really good, but it's especially good this year. I'm a believer in the Rockets. I hope they stick with it. Oh, one more thing. Jabari Smith Jr., after a terrible start to the year, like last 2 weeks, figuring it out. And it makes me so happy as a guy that loved Jabari coming out of the draft. He's finally starting to kind of find his role. The thing with him is when the team is playing well and they're sharing the ball, Jabari looks absolutely great, and he looks like he's got plays with a lot of joy. When they start grinding it out into more ISO heavy stuff, I'll just be honest. When Jalen Green has the ball, he looks miserable. And so like when they're sharing it, I think Jabari is very much a player that needs to play his team has to play the right way to get the best out of him. And there's a lot of times when I think Houston's doing that.
You hit on a couple players that I want to get to there, but I'll start with Jabari Smith. Like, he is kind of a front runner of a player, but that's not a bad thing. Like you need guys who, when everything's going well, they just add something. He is additive to it. Like you think about like the Warriors when they won the title in 2022. Jordan Poole was very much a front runner on that team. That didn't make him invaluable. That made him like an important part of that title run. And then he goes to the Wizards, and there's not a lot of fronting to be running, I guess. But I think Jabari Smith is part of there. And Dylan Brooks is kind of like one of these 60-40, 70-30 guys where it's like 60 to 70% of what he does is really helpful. And then he'll just do like a J.R. Smithian kind of boneheaded thing. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? And it's so loud on the court that you can easily get frustrated with him. But all in all, they have the third rated defense in the NBA. I thought last year's defense, they were highly rated defensively. I can't remember exactly where they were. To me, it was like, I'm like, is this real or not? I was kind of going into the year. I'm like, how, the transition stuff was real, but like, I don't know. Now they actually have the personnel to back it up. I think this defense is almost like you still have all the good coaching principles, but it's obviously better than last year because it feels like the personnel is backing it up. You look at their numbers with Amin Thompson and Tari Eason on the court without Jalen Green, not to keep,
Yeah.
doing this, but a 102 defensive rating. I mean, that's crazy, dude. Like that is absolutely crazy. And those guys are coming off the bench for them. And they have, I'm not sure they have the too many guys problem that so many people have accused them of having. Like they're to me, because of their success, they're 11-5 right now. Like I don't know that they have to, they're not this team that I'm looking at like the way I looked at in preseason. Like, oh yeah, they have to make a trade. They have to consolidate some of these guys. I'm like, no, a lot of these guys are just good, and the cream will rise to the top. And by the end of the year, the guys who need the minutes will get the minutes.
Yeah, and like, look, there are some numbers. They're like 15th in location expected EFG based off of cleaning the glass, right? So, and like third in actual. So, like, there's a little bit of shooting regression. But if you look at it, like, they're defending the rim really well, and they're not allowing a lot of threes. Like the EFG differential is mostly in mid range. That's where you want to allow shots. Like their shots should be low value there, and so I think they're getting good contest up. I think there's a lot of reason. Again, do I expect the Rockets to necessarily be like a 53 win pace team? No, but I do think that there's like a very strong possibility that they wind up being hey, like they had a really great year and that builds them forward. I still think they have tough decisions on the horizon about how to build this team, but I think that if you're a fan of the Rockets, you should just sit back and watch this team right now because they're so much fun.
Ime Udoka, front runner for coach of the year, probably at this point. It feels like it. No?
Atkinson.
You're right.
It's got to be Atkinson. I mean,
let's talk about him.
They were undefeated until Tuesday, and I think the biggest thing with Atkinson, and it's a little unfair, honestly, because I think if you look at it, one of the ways I've kind of looked at this is, and this is my position going into the year, JB Bickerstaff's really good at building scheme. Like he can get you guys, he can take any group of guys and get them to play pretty well, but JB doesn't get the best out of individual players, and you kind of saw
he's an organizer.
Yeah, so like, and that matters. You need structure, but I think if you look at Atkinson, he is not only like building on that scheme and building more complex stuff into it, and the offense has more mechanisms, but defensively, he's getting the best individually out of players and offensively. Karis LeVert's thriving. He thrived with him in Brooklyn. That makes sense. Evan Mobley's having the best season of his career. And like Evan was probably going to make a jump anyway, just based off his projection, but it's an even higher one. Darius Garland looks right back to where he needs to be. But then you look at the bench and you're like, all these guys, right? Dean Wade and Niang and Craig Porter Jr., Sam Merrill. Like Atkinson's getting the best out of the players individually and the team as a whole. And that's why he's going to be front runner for coach of the year, because all of those things combined are why the Cavaliers got off to that undefeated start.
It's such a great call. And you listen to Atkinson talk, and those years that he spent in Golden State under Steve Kerr ended up being really valuable. And you can even just kind of get some of those Steve Kerrisms in the Kenny Atkinson quotes. Like I was reading something the other day, I think it was a Windhorse piece on ESPN about, and he keeps talking about guys like Niang and Merrill and Okoro, and he's like, these guys are connectors. These guys are connectors. I'm like, yo, that's what Steve Kerr talks. That's what he says about everybody that's not Draymond and Steph on that team too. Brandon Podziemski's a connector, and you need those connectors. And credit to the Cavs front office too for being like, look, let's get our coach. We think this can make a big difference. We're not in a rush to change the roster. Like, what's our window is wide open. Like, what's the rush? Yeah. Let's just see what Atkinson can do by himself with the roster before we make major changes and make the trade that everybody wants us to make, Jared Allen for Brandon Ingram or whatever it is. And so they don't do any of that. They bring back the roster, and they're playing a lot better. And you just watch the Cavaliers play, and it's not even a schematic thing necessarily. It's just do it faster, do it harder, set better screens, crash the board for rebounds, like really do it harder. And he's got these guys bought in. And I think this is an underrated part that I don't think gets brought up enough. Donovan Mitchell having signed the extension, that security, the long term just sort of comfort of this is where I am. I don't need to put up these huge numbers to get this next contract and whatever it is. I think that also is factored into some of the kumbaya kind of vibes around Cleveland right now.
Yeah, and I think the other thing when you kind of watch it is it's always helpful when everybody's paid. That makes things a lot easier. I think one of the things that's been impressive about Atkinson, and this is something I wish coaches could convey a little bit more, and you see this with teams that overperform versus underperform. You have to get guys to believe you're going to get your numbers, you're going to get your production, you're going to get your touches and your opportunities and your bonuses, but you can do that and we can also make everybody better. It's not an either or. The decision is not binary between move the rock or get yours. Move the rock, it will come back to you and you will score.
Mm-hmm.
You will have these opportunities. Make your teammate better and you will get that transition outlet. And like these are all very simple like sports things, right? Like how many of us are taught that in any sort of level of sports, but they get lost in the NBA with the politics. I think Atkinson's done a really good job of getting everybody to buy in to the idea of I am going to make everybody better and they're going to make me better and we're all going to succeed because of it.
And then when you kind of drill down on the numbers, one of the things, and it looks like it too, is they've mitigated some of the fit issues that I think still do certainly exist on the roster with just driving to the basket, not just the playing harder and the moving faster, but they rank fourth in the league in drives per game. And they were near the bottom of the league in drives per game last year. And the reason I bring that up is because like a lot of that fit stuff goes away when it's either like somebody's driving to the basket and kicking out to an open guy. Like at that point, fit doesn't really matter, right? Because if you're getting a drive and kick and that guy can shoot, then I don't care about the fit or the the redundancies or whatever it is. And Darius Garland, outside of that Boston game, having a career year shooting wise, and that's been very helpful for him. Coming back from last year's weird injury and the rough season that he had, and then you've got Donovan Mitchell settled in and Evan Mobley making that leap. So Cleveland absolutely deserves to be in this tier. We have gone 10 minutes. You mentioned the Lakers and Warriors. We skipped right over them. We talked Houston and Cleveland. Good for us. But let's talk Lakers Warriors. Which one do you want to hit there?
I'll talk Lakers. So here's a part of the thing is like I've got a power rating that basically projects how much should you be favored versus an average team on neutral court. My numbers were high on the Lakers coming into the season. They're still high on them, but for different reasons. The offense really does cook. Like this offense is really good. I don't know how good they're going to be defensively. I think that's probably what's going to slide over the next couple of months. But I do think this team is really good. I think this team is actually better than the record because when you look at it, a lot of it, like, okay, are they worse than the Raptors? Like, no. Like, they had a really rough road trip. An East Coast road trip. They got a little discombobulated, and that's fine. I don't think that this is like a super contender. I don't think that, and that's going to be the problem is if the Lakers are any good, the conversation becomes like, they're going to win the title. And it's like, oh, okay, but they're good. That's about it. Like, they're just good. And, but I do think part of it is last year was really frustrating because they were probably better than their record and they just couldn't get the pieces together. And they kept saying like, look, we're hurt. And everybody's like, LeBron and AD are playing. Don't want to hear it. LeBron and AD are playing. The difference this year is that it really does matter when you have continuity and you have guys that can play together. And like Redick, I think, is making a big difference. Mm-hmm. I think that maybe some of the JJ stuff is a little overstated just because everyone hated Darvin by the end. But the vibe's
have
better.
Have you heard about how detail-oriented he is?
Yeah. 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 A little bit, right? Like, a little bit. A little bit.
Too much.
A little bit too much. And so, but it's like, they really do have the ability to build good 5-man lineups that aren't just LeBron and AD do stuff. Like they do have guys that can contribute. They've been dominant at home. They're beating bad teams for the most part outside of that little blip stretch versus the Pistons and Raptors. And they're taking care of business in the ways that they need to. That's how you build a really good team. I put them in this tier because I do think that most people were like, yeah, they're probably a play-in team again. And I'm like, I don't know. I think this team is probably above that and just like, they're not super frustrated right now. I think that's a bonus to them. So I'll go ahead and get them in the this is so much fun tier.
Dalton Connect has been such a revelation for them. And I'm fully in. Like, I'm in on this guy. And I don't know if it would have worked everywhere. I know there's like, oh, I can't believe 17 teams passed on Dalton Connect or whatever it was. It's like he's in the perfect scenario where he's playing with LeBron James, who has there ever been anybody as good as getting good shooters, good shots in NBA history as LeBron? And
right.
Dalton Connect is a great shooter, and he had that run the other night where whatever it was, like 6 3-pointers in 3.5 minutes to close the quarter there. And that there to me there's like tiers of shooters, right? You've got like good 3-point shooters who can make a couple in a row, and then maybe you get that heat check third one, and maybe it goes in, maybe it doesn't, whatever. Then you got that next tier, like that Klay Thompson, Steph Curry tier, where, and not to be extremely hyperbolic and only name there's a lot of guys in that tier, but like you hit the second one, you hit that heat check third one. Oh my god, that one went in. Oh my god, I'm gonna heat check this one again a fourth time. That one goes in. Like where you don't get in your head and you're just locked in and you can just hit this zone where other shooters can't hit. And Dalton Connect very clearly can get into that zone. He just did it. And to have that kind of shooter on the Lakers is so important. He has to start to me. Like you have to maximize his minutes next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. He is so important to that team. But then you're looking at, okay, we've got Austin Reeves, Dalton Connect, LeBron, AD, and a fifth guy, whether it's Cam Reddish or Rui Hachimura when he comes back or whatever it's going to be. And it's like defensively, we're going to be shaky. But it's like we were already shaky defensively, so who cares? Let's just be awesome offensively. And I guess the Lakers, every time I watch the Lakers broadcast, are like, just wait until Vanderbilt comes back. And I'm like, okay, I can wait. I'm not like that much in a rush,
Yeah.
But they need to make a move, in other words. But I think they do have some really good pieces right now.
I actually think that they're very well balanced right now. The thing is that if you look at the records, when Rui plays, they win a ton of games. Like when Rui, LeBron, and AD play together, that team wins at like a 53 win pace. And if you buffer that with now D'Lo coming off the bench and Connect coming off the bench, you kind of have this really good balance where the starting unit has offensive firepower with the stars and better defense. And the second unit has much worse defense, but so much firepower with one of the starters, one of the two stars. And so like that balance makes a lot of work. You can do that. I am kind of this belief that you should not try and have your bench be balanced. Your bench should either be locked down,
like
grit
a
and
specialist
ride,
unit,
junkyard dogs, or it should be like, hey, we're going to run up and down and shoot a lot of threes, and we're just going to speed this game up and play with some offensive firepower and energy, and that's going to get us an advantage at home, especially a lot of the time. So I think that balance actually really does work for them as it stands. There's so much talk about them making another move, and if one comes available, if they get some sort of Lakers sweetheart deal, then fine. But I don't think that they need it. And I also just continue to look at it and be like, whomst is like, yes, D'Lo and a pick for our good player. Sign me up. So I just don't know if it's out there for them to really make that move this year.
If they could just upgrade that Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood spot with like a solid backup center, that's all I want. I just like that. I would feel so much more comfortable with them. It's such a great call though, that bench unit, because I think sometimes we confuse like, oh, this team is balanced, or we even throw around the word versatility in place of these players or this group don't do anything well. And I'm with you. I'd rather just have like some sort of offensive juggernaut, like kind of, microwave scorer coming off the bench, a unit built around that guy that can at least just do something for 3 to 5 minutes a game. So speaking of depth, the Golden State Warriors, you've got Steve Kerr playing a 12-man rotation. The news today is that D'Anthony Melton is going to be out for the rest of the season with this ACL injury. So that does complicate things a little bit, but also kind of simplifies things a little bit. Like Melton was starting, so that's a complication. But now you have one less guy who you kind of need to feed minutes to. And I think everybody in Golden State is aware, like, this can't last forever in terms of playing all these guys. But for now, it's been working. You've got Lindy Waters kind of starting in Melton's spot, and he's been phenomenal for them basically since he got there. I like you having Golden State in this tier. I had them in my top tier also. What is it that you like about the Warriors, though?
Their record.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, like, I'm not overly sold on this team. Like the overall record is good, and I can't find, like, when you look through the numbers, there's not like the aha, right? Like everything kind of matches what the overall record suggests, what the overall numbers. It's like, oh, the defense is really good. What's their expected? Oh, it's right in line with that. Like all these things are very much in line. And like you're back to Draymond, just absolutely them dominating in his minutes. But here's like a curious one. If you dive into the Draymond stuff, they are 13 points better offensively with Draymond on the floor and 9.8 points worse defensively with him on the court. Now, there's still only a 108.8 with him on the court, which is still great. But what this probably tells you is like the bench is probably overperforming a little bit defensively. Like that's when you look at the shot numbers and the expected stuff, that's usually where you can find the split is like, oh, so like in the non-starter minutes, there's an outlier happening. And that's when that regresses, things will kind of settle out a little bit more. They've been phenomenal to start the year. I think they're always going to be really good when their guys are healthy and fresh. It's when they start to get banged up by the season that I start to worry about this team because they're still so dependent on Steph and Draymond. Like they're just always going to be so dependent on those guys. And so the question just becomes, because this was the thing that happened last year. Steph was phenomenal that first half of the year, 3/4 honestly. And then like the last like quarter of the year, the counting stats were good, but the impact wasn't. And they just weren't winning as much. And so if you kind of get to that point, my question just kind of becomes, is there something that kind of happens as he gets older? You get to game 60, things start to slow down a little bit for them. That said, I just think that there's so many guys. One of the things that they've really benefited from is there are these stretches where I'm like, oh, what are they going to do now? Okay, like nobody's really up. There goes Kuminga, and he pops off for like a quick 8-0 stretch. They need something here. Oh, there's Lindsey Waters. Lindsey Waters giving them a really good boost on that end. So I think the Melton injury is probably sneakier, bigger than most people would realize. I think it's going to impact them, but like I had to put them here, like with the expectations coming in of like, yeah, maybe we'll be able to make the playoffs, and they've been one of the best teams in the league. They got to go here for this is so much fun.
They're 5-1 against teams with a top 10 point differential, which on its face, you're like, wow, that's the mark of a very good basketball team. But then you look at those teams that they played in those specific games. Okay, one of them was against Oklahoma City, where Chet Holmgren broke his hip like 8 minutes into the game. All right, how much does that one really count? All right, you did get a win against Houston, but you gave up a 31-point lead in that game, so that was a weird one. So okay, that counts. You did lose to Cleveland. That's the loss. You won against Boston and Dallas. Those are good wins. Boston was without a couple guys there, but those are good, legitimate statement wins. So I'm with you in terms of I don't know that they are like I don't have them as a contender. I'm not sold, but I have them as like a pretty firm playoff team. My main concern is like when does the feature become a bug? Right, with them, where like, oh, the depth is really like working for us, and look what we've kind of stumbled upon here, and maybe we unlock this secret code to the NBA and all these things that the Warriors are always light years ahead on stuff. And then they're going to go on a 4-game skid because every team does. It's going to happen. And all of a sudden there's going to be, well, Steph needs more help. There's no number 2 scorer on this team. It's too many guys playing. Steve Kerr has to pick his top 9 guys and stick with them. That's going to happen. That will be a storyline at some point. I don't know when, but it's going to happen because it happens to everybody. All right, let's move on to your next tier. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The basketball season is finally here, and Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There's so many ways to save money on tickets no matter when you buy. Game Time Picks shows you only the best values on tickets. Game Time has last-minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. They have exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big savings. And by toggling on all-in pricing, you see the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
All right, the next tier is we knew it all along, which is these teams are pretty much, they were expected to be good, and they're good. I've got the Thunder. Can't be like, wow, when they were expected to be the 1 seed in the West, and they are. The Knicks, they've been, I think, better offensively, but worse defensively, and they're just, so that balances out. The Magic are probably the most impressive of this group from the perspective of losing Paolo Banchero and being like, nope, still good. We're still really competitive. Can't win a road game outside of that Phoenix one, but in general. And then the Boston Celtics. Like, the Celtics are exactly what everyone thought they would be. There's some permutations there where it's like, I am keeping a close eye on the Celtics of, I think there are a few blemishes under the car, like just underneath has got a few things where you're like, that's interesting. Some wear and tear under the hood, so to speak. But the overall vehicle is still what we thought it was, which is they're probably going to be the 1 seed in the East.
Let's talk about Boston there, because I do think it's kind of funny. If there was a critique last year, which essentially washed away once they got to the finals and blew out the Dallas Mavericks, but it was they were too reliant on the 3-point shot, and they weren't getting to the rim enough. And even when they would get to the rim, they would still like pass up wide open shots at the basket, or even contested shots at the basket, and kick out to 3-point shooters. And they really just tried to lean into the math game. And the Celtics heard all of your critiques and they said, bet. And they doubled down on it. And they're taking even a higher rate of their shots from beyond the arc now. They're shooting like 55% of their shots come from beyond the arc now. They're taking more than 53 pointers a game. It's crazy what they're doing, and yet it's working. Obviously, you just look at their record, their win against Cleveland the other night, their opening night, bombardment over the Knicks. But I'm with you. I don't know. Under the hood, I don't know. Is it their defense hasn't been what it's been? They're middle of the pack, but also you watch these games and they're just sort of walking. It's like a walkthrough defensively for them. They're literally walking to their closeouts. Like they obviously just don't care. But then you see them turn it up against Cleveland, and you're like, okay, when this team wants to turn it up, they can turn it up. So to say that I'm worried about the Celtics would be a gross overstatement. But when you're kind of popping up the hood and looking underneath, like what are the things that are sticking out to you?
I think it's all about margin. So their fan base will be like, none of the points in the paint stuff is a concern because of KP. None of that matters. And I'm like, okay, couple things. One, KP is always going to struggle with strong post up players. Mm-hmm. So if the Sixers were to actually get themselves together, or Joel Embiid winds up on a different team, that's going to be a little bit of a concern. If you make the finals, you face Nikola Jokic, that can be an issue. If you face, honestly, this Cleveland Cavaliers team, I don't think automatically that it's like, oh, KP would just block Evan Mobley and Jared Allen on all these plays. That's not how this works. Like Allen's very physical and can finish through KP. The other thing is that KP, they're going to switch a lot, and KP is going to play up higher. And so that backline defense is where you start to struggle when it's like, look, Drew Holiday and Derek White are super disruptive and elite defenders. You can't ask those guys to legitimately be backside rim protectors when you're playing switch. So if you have teams that can get underneath a little bit, there's just not as much there because they do play a little bit smaller with basically three guards, Tatum and the big. It's their ideal lineup, unless they go bigger with Horford. And then it's like, okay, is Horford going to be your weak side rotation guy? Like, if all of this sounds like these are minute details, they are, which is why they're in this tier. Like, yeah, they're going to be really good. They're going to be very much in position. But I thought the criticism of Boston went too far last year in the playoffs of they didn't play anybody, and nobody really acknowledged that it was like, look, they play unselfishly. They all move the ball. They all make the right play, and they are all quality shooters. This formula does work regardless of the quality of competition. But after winning the title now, shifted a little too far. And now it's like, well, they're just verified and no questions and there's no weaknesses. And I'm like, no, this is still the team that we were like, can they really get it done?
Right.
Until they got it done last year versus a road that was very favorable to them. And that's okay. It doesn't change that banner 18 hangs. But when I put them in here and we knew it all along, they're exactly as good as they should be for now. But if the shooting rhythm changes, if the defense slips a little bit more, if they don't sharpen as the season goes along, they're probably going to drop a tier. And to me, that is relevant. But I am giving them enough credit to put them in this tier still.
I think the greatest thing they figured out from the start of last season to the point that we're at now is what Jaylen Brown's role is on this team, because Jason Tatum is an efficiency monster, right? Like that guy wants to take threes and take shots at the rim, and he wants to get guys involved. Derek White, Drew Holiday, stars in their roles, Kristaps, like all these guys, Al Horford. Brown is sort of not, right? Brown is sort of the wild card there. He's like, I hear all of your efficiency stuff, but I'm a hooper, right? If anybody on that team's a hooper, it's Jaylen Brown. And then you get to the crunch time in that Cleveland game where the Cavaliers storm back, they make it a 1 or 2 possession game late. And what is it that they do? They don't go back to the 3-point ball. They give the ball to Jaylen Brown, and he gets to the basket twice in a row. And that's the difference. Like last year, they weren't really sure how to use him. Now it's like, give the ball to Jaylen. He's the hammer. He's the guy that can punch it inside. When we really need a bucket, he's kind of the guy that does that. And it's not always Jason Tatum. Obviously, Tatum can do that. But the fact that they can have that with Jaylen Brown is really important. So they figured out that piece. But let's go to the Thunder, the other team in this tier. We knew it all along, which is funny for a team that made 2 major additions in the offseason, but they were such seamless fits that we're like, we see exactly how this is going to work. Yeah. And then it was they did their homework so early, like in the offseason, that we had like a couple of months to talk about how great of a fit Hartenstein and Caruso were going to be. that right before the season you started getting some like, are we sure the Thunder are going to be this great? They're still pretty young. Is it going to be the perfect fit? All these things, and then they get on the court and you're like, yeah, it's actually better than we even thought it was going to be. And then Hartenstein goes out. He comes back. He plays his first game Wednesday night off the bench, and he looks amazing. He's getting his first point with the Oklahoma City Thunder as an offensive putback, and you're like, of course it is. That's exactly why they brought you here. Has like 3 or 4 assists in that game. We knew it all along with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're awesome.
Yeah, it was weird to me when people were like, well, sure, they might be better defensively, but, this changes the offense. I'm like, do you think that Hartenstein is like Bismack Biyombo? Like, who do you think that he is, man? Because Hartenstein's a really great short roll option, and that's the whole thing is when you have to blitz Shea because he's so good to try and contain him, that means Hartenstein's rolling, and Shea's tall enough to make that pass over the top. And if you give Hartenstein 4-on-3, there are guys that are better at it, Draymond Green being probably the best of all time at it, but Hartenstein's really good. He's going to make the kick to the corner if you help down. He's going to make the lob on the cut if you step up to help rotate. And he's going to finish if you play back. Like, he's going to hit the floater. So there's all these kind of weapons. Caruso, honestly, like, this is what's crazy. Now, I'll say this. The defense probably gets worse, but the counter to that is that the offense, because it's just been unsustainably great, the defense has. But the shooting probably improves. They've got so many good shooters that honestly haven't had great starts to the season. Jalen Williams is starting to get rolling now after a tough start to the season. They have so many weapons, so many variations, so many options. They're so well coached. They all play the same way. They are unbelievable. And honestly, they were so healthy last year that was a big drop. Was like, hey, what are they going to do when they got hurt? Well, they lose Chet Holmgren and they survive that stretch without him until Hartenstein gets back. They're going to, they'll probably still have some injury issues along the way, but it is really impressive to me. You look at a team like the Philadelphia 76ers that go from whatever they would have been at full health to this. And I just continue to be like, you have to be able to win when guys are out. And OKC's proven they can do that, and that's going to help them manage the schedule. That is a testament to how good they are overall, which is how good we thought they would be.
And how well they're coached, and the culture that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and everybody at the top of that thing can the fact that you asked Jalen Williams, it's like, look, you're playing center for us. You're going to start at center. You're going to guard centers, and like they switch and they crowd the ball and whatever. But you're going to be it's going to be tough for you, buddy. A lot of players would be like, hell no, dude. Start Kenrich Williams. That's what he's here for. Like, he's the dirty work guy. And Jalen Williams is like, nope, I got it. I could do it. He's sort of been their most important player at the beginning part of the season because he's sort of that guy that is filling in those gaps. And that's despite the fact that he started the season shooting pretty poorly. He had like 30 points the other night. He's starting to get going here, but he's been awesome for them. And I think there's a world where we can kind of look at this year and just be like, Jalen Williams made a leap, but it wasn't really the leap we thought it was going to be, where everybody is, okay, he's going to take that leap to superstar second scorer. Like, that might be out there for maybe Chet Holmgren. He can grab that. Like, that's totally there for him. And then obviously like defensive player of the year stuff with Chet also. Like, he might end up being like that guy where Jalen Williams ends up being sort of this like jack of all trades, kind of just the exact right, for lack of a better phrase, like complementary role player that Chet and Shai need. I'm not sure that's necessarily going to happen, but I think that's more of a pathway for him where he can still be like an all-star caliber player, but like in a little bit of a different shape than we maybe had thought.
There's very few parallels I can find with this team and what I used to refer to as the Starship Thunder team from the early 2010s with Katie and Russ. But one is that Jalen seems very much, he's less of a connector than Harden. But there is, to me, this kind of thing of, do you need Jalen Williams? No. Is it great to have him? Absolutely. But the other thing that I keep coming back to, and like this is like very speculative, we'll talk about this team in a minute. But let's say that things didn't turn around for Milwaukee and things spiraled. I do keep looking at it. If you're looking at trade offers for Giannis, and OKC's like, take your pick of any of the picks, and we'll give you Jalen Williams. You're not getting a better offer than that. Period. End dot. Period. End dot. And like, I think OKC is probably going to slow play it because that's how Presti approaches these things. But I do keep thinking of like, could Jalen Williams be the guy for a team? Yeah, I think so. Would a team that has to trade a superstar want Jalen Williams? Absolutely. But in the meantime, you're right. He feels a very good fit next to them in terms of doing the jack of all trades stuff.
He's an easy sell to a fan base. And then you're just like, yeah, he'll come in and do like the whoop, whoop, whoop parking thing. And that'll get everybody going. So that New York, just quick on them. I feel like everybody talked like Karl Anthony Towns has been great for them. He's averaging a career high in points. He's shooting 55 and 50 from the field. He's great. I do want to spend a little bit more time on the Orlando Magic. I think the best thing to happen to Franz was Paolo getting hurt. And so you see this every once in a while. It's like, hey man, you started off the season a little slow, and we know you're going to work out of your shooting slump eventually. But one way to kind of fast track that is to take the crutch away, and now you just got to go. And Paolo was the crutch, and he was amazing to start the year. And he'll be back, I think, by the end of December, early January. But in the meantime, Franz has really kind of taken a step and broken out of this, and so much so that he's putting all-star numbers together. And now you got the all-star campaign coming out of Orlando. I mean, there's real stuff happening there. Anthony Black has taken a little bit of a leap here, who I always kind of liked. He comes off the bench for them. The Goga Batazdes stuff has been awesome. Like, if you're looking for the next Hartenstein, look at Goga. Like, that's the next guy I would go get if I'm a team looking to try to get another big time center here. But your thoughts on Orlando, though?
They're still very much like this defensive squad, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's their bread and butter. That's how they get by. With Paolo, they had a 115 offensive rating on court, and that's phenomenal. And that was with Wendell Carter Jr. too. So like they're missing two guys that they want to have in their rotation. So like I still worry a little bit about the offense. There's a lot of like room for them to kind of, I think, get better in those regards. I think they will when Paolo gets back. The challenge I think with Franz is like, all right, so does he struggle when Paolo's there? Like if Paolo comes back and Franz immediately kind of not shrinks, but kind of fades a little bit, and just is like, yeah, he's good, then what does that say? What does that mean? Even and if you're winning games, does it matter? But they're so competitive. They hit you in waves. You'll be like, all right, we can make maybe a run here, and then Mo Wagner makes like 3 huge plays. They have Jonathan Isaac who can make huge plays. They have so many guys who can contribute. I like what Tristan Da Silva has given them this season. KCP is only now starting to kind of refine his shot and get comfortable. As Suggs, I think, is still finding his shot as well. I think there's a lot of upside. I'm of the point now where with the Magic, I'm kind of like, I don't know if they're going to be as good of a regular season team in terms of wins as maybe some people expect. But I think maybe this team is better built for the playoffs than I thought before. I think their upside long-term is going to be very high.
Yeah, because when you have Paolo doing the isolation stuff, that translates. That's directly translatable to the postseason, where in the regular season it can get into a little bit of a grind. They're a team where I was really glad they didn't make sort of a big push trade in the summer. Like, they're another one of those teams like, yes, we know what the flaws are on the roster. It doesn't mean you have to fix all these flaws right now. I like the idea of putting Paolo and Franz in the stress test blender, in the stress test fire, rather, and just be like, you guys got to become better playmakers. You guys got to become better shot creators. And we're not going to bring in a point guard to bail you out while you're on this part of your developmental curve. And now I look at this team a little bit, and I'm like, they almost do have too many guys. Like the Da Silvas and all these guys, like they're good. Like they have like 4 centers who can all play. And I'm wondering if this is a consolidation trade team where they just kind of clean up the roster a little bit and go get just one other little piece, not the major trade that people were pushing for, but just like a little piece. Like could you go and get like, I don't know, Michael Porter Jr. or something? Like could you take like 3 of these rotation guys, like a Da Silva and Isaac and like a some other salary, and send it to Denver and be like, we'll fix your bench. Here's your new bench. Just give us Michael Porter Jr.
Honestly, I think the challenge there is that's a separate issue. But I think MPJ's injury history is always going to make those trades tough. The type of trade you're talking about is actually simpler. This is what the Wendell Carter Jr. extension made 0 sense to me, taking him off the table for trade talks. Because the deal was Wendell Carter Jr. and a Wendell Carter Jr. and maybe a pick swap for CJ McCollum. Like that's the move. And like right now, it would be an amazing deal if they could have pulled that off, because the Pels have to be like, all right, season's over. We're done. Let's start moving money off the books. That would have been like such a perfect trade scenario for them.
I have another Pelicans trade.
Okay, hit me.
Isaac and Goga for Ingram. Brandon Ingram.
See, I hate that.
Okay.
I don't want anything that takes the ball out of Franz and Paolo's hands. I don't want.
Totally fair.
The only teams that need to trade for Brandon Ingram are teams where it's like, we need anyone who can create their own offense. Like that's the teams that need to be looking for Brandon Ingram. And while the Magic offense is bad, they need somebody who's going to be like, I can play off ball. I can play on ball. I'll make your offense better in both regards. And like a little bit of a firebug scorer, like a little bit of a burst, but not like a real ball dominant, heavy volume thing. So for me, it's like, I think CJ's perfect because you don't need to start him. You can
Right.
play your defensive lineups. But if it's like, hey, we're going to put CJ on the court with Suggs and Franz in these and Goga, and we're going to be able to make these types of that lineup's going to be balanced offensively and defensively. That to me is the answer.
So CJ McCollum is working his way back, so maybe that's still an option, even though you can't move Wendell Carter for him. But I like the idea of like, I don't know how important Jonathan Isaac is to this roster. Like he's an amazing minute for minute defender. I prefer my defenders to be able to play 30 minutes. I don't know. I think he's gotten a little too overrated defensively at this point. And he got wiped off the floor against bigger dudes against Cleveland in the playoffs last year. Like let's not act like this is he can guard 1 through 4, not necessarily 1 through 5 in big moments. And I'm like, maybe now is the time to sell high on him because you have all these amazing defenders already there and all this size. Like he's a little superfluous in my mind. So yeah, CJ McCollum, like even again, like Brandon Ingram to me, I was just thinking like 1 year, if it doesn't work out, he walks. It's sort of like the Gordon Hayward thing from last year. It's like, yeah, didn't work. Too bad.
You can't take an expiring contract if you're Orlando because that just means you're going to overpay in free agency and in what
That's
now
fair.
all the free agency classes are bad. You're going to pay that small market tax and it's going to kill you.
Anything else on Orlando? Because they are fascinating. But
No, I think we locked it.
next tier.
All right, this is fine, but like we're okay. We're totally fine. I'm sorry, I jumped. Vibes about to shift. That's where
This is the interesting tier, and I'm curious about one of the teams in here because you sent them to me ahead of time, just so people don't know that I'm like not a mind reader here.
These are teams where it's like this has not been the start they wanted, but things are probably going to improve. The Dallas Mavericks, the Denver Nuggets, the Phoenix Suns, and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Are the Suns in here just because of the injury stuff?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's it.
That was the only question I had. All right.
Like it's literally like if the Suns, if KD had not gotten injured and their pets' heads hadn't fallen off for 2 weeks, this team would be in This Is So Much Fun. Like I think the Suns are a legitimate Western Conference contender, fully healthy.
With the big three, fifth in offensive rating, tied with Boston for 13th in defensive rating. Now, obviously, you don't have your big three on the court all the time, but you pretty much do in the playoffs, and that's a pretty dominant number where, look, if you could just get average defensively, that's pretty much the best you can be for Phoenix. The key to me was always for them, like they were outside the top 10 in offensive rating last year. How? Why? Why was that ever a thing? If you're elite offensively, that's the formula for them. And they were hitting that formula until some of these injuries came in. And also shout out to Bradley Beal for caring about defense. Like that's been a pretty major development for them.
Yeah. The thing on the offense is very simple and very explainable. They wouldn't take threes.
Right.
I don't know. They just wouldn't do it. And that was my concern with them coming in. That's why I didn't buy heavily into them. Cause I was like, I got to see it. Like you got to prove to me you're going to take them.
I was with you because Mike Budenholzer out of the league for a year. You never know how guys like Kevin Durant and Booker and Beal, who have gone through their share of head coaches, would respond to Budenholzer. And everybody's like, well, Tyus Jones will get him organized. I'm like, Tyus Jones, like I like Tyus Jones, but he's a point guard making the minimum. Like, why are these superstar future Hall of Famers going to listen to what he's doing? Like, he's going to dictate the tone of the offense? Yes, turns out he will, and so would Budenholzer. And they did. Credit to all of them. They bought in. Absolutely.
They bought in, and once they bought in, I bought in. I was like, all right, I'm in on this team, and so that's why they're in this tier.
Yep. So I'm curious. Okay, so the Bucks. So the Mavericks and the Nuggets things, those are pretty self-explanatory. The Nuggets are starting to play a little bit better. They'll get Jokic back here. Jamal Murray might have had his breakout game earlier this week.
I'll see.
We hope. Yeah. Luka Doncic is going to be out for a week in Dallas. Some news worth sharing here. So we'll see what happens. So their vibe shift is going to be postponed maybe a week here. The Milwaukee Bucks, is this just because they've won 3 out of the last 4?
Do you know where they rank in schedule adjusted defense?
Where?
10th. No kidding.
That's surprising.
So when we kind of got here, I was I was ready to be like, you can't do it. Like the whole blow it up. It's done. It's toast. It's blah, blah, blah. And then you like dig in under the radar. And then you kind of again, we look under the hood at these things and you wind up being like, wait, like when I saw that, I was like, wait, they're 10th? Like they're like it's schedule adjusted. Now a lot of that's because they faced the 4th best defensive strength of schedule so far. Like they've faced a lot of good offenses, so their numbers are going to look a little bit better there. But that's one of the reasons why they look so bad is like they played a bunch of good teams that beat them because they weren't very good at the time. this is such a long season. And so the whole thing with teams in this area, and the Sixers are in a very different tier, but they're in a similar spot of the question becomes pain tolerance. Can your locker room stay together and stay the course? Because part of it can honestly be if the front office is just like, we're going to wait. Like, we're not doing it. We're not going to make any sort of panic moves. I'm not trading Giannis Antetokounmpo because we're 5 games under 500. Like, I'm not doing it. If you just like hang out, your season over the course of 82 games will usually stabilize and you'll wind up fine. Now, like, the upside's probably gone. It's very unlikely not extremely unlikely, but very unlikely the Milwaukee Bucks wind up as like a 50+ win juggernaut team.
Right.
Like 55's out, 50+ is like, that's probably not happening. You're probably 45 to 50 if things go well. And that's probably good enough, because if you're better by the end of the season and you've figured stuff out, and some of it's like they've started to figure, like Doc's figured out, oh, hey, AJ Green needs to play. Like, he's just really good. Like, AJ just has to play. And when he plays, good things happen. And so as they kind of go through these options, now I don't love this team. I don't trust Doc Rivers to get the most out of them. It's not that Doc's a bad coach. I just don't trust Doc to get the most out of this squad. Mid is progressing. That's a little bit of a touchy thing, I think, and continues to be a little bit I'm a little bit worried about the vibes with that. But let's say that they get Chris back at some point. And if we look at these numbers and we go, okay, so things have been largely okay. And the other thing is you can really isolate this down. And I put this on Twitter the other day. They're fine when Dame's on the floor defensively. They're fine. They're fine when Bobby's on the floor defensively, as long as Dame's not on the court. They're totally okay. It's the minutes when Dame and Bobby play together, they get obliterated. And so that's like something you can fix as the season goes along, whether in those minutes or not playing them as much together. And so when I kind of looked at it, I was like, man, Milwaukee's probably going to be okay. Like, there was a 10 days ago, I was like, all right, where are we sending it? Like, who's Rick Lopez getting traded to? And now I'm like, look, I don't think they're winning the title.
Right.
But I do think that they're going to be okay.
It's really hard to be as bad as they were when you have somebody like Giannis.
Right.
It's really, really difficult. And the pain tolerance thing that you mentioned before is a great point. And that's his job. That's Giannis's job. And partially Doc Rivers, but it's mostly on Giannis. And we'll see. I think they're still sort of in the thick of it right now, but they're 3 games under 500. It's not the nightmare scenario it looked like before. They're 5-3 since taking Gary Trent Jr. out of the starting lineup, and they've kind of gone through a few different versions of that starting lineup. But Gary Trent Jr. was having a hard time shooting the ball. He's not offering you much defensively, and so they've gone with Andre Jackson. They've gone with AJ Green, like some different names there, but they're starting to figure things out. So I'm with you here on the vibe shift. The boat hasn't made the turn that it needs to make, but we're kind of fighting through the wind and we're working on it. And that pirate ship boat in this metaphor is not working anymore. Today's episode of Real GM Radio is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, with Prize Picks, your picks are still alive. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you could still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Next tier.
All right, the next tier. Hey, we don't suck. These are teams that are not good. But it's like, oh, hey, like we're better than maybe we thought we might be or that people thought we might be. It's the Chicago Bulls, the Brooklyn Nets, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Detroit Pistons.
The most surprising team to not suck is the Brooklyn Nets. I think it was
Yeah.
them in Washington. You know better than me. Tied for lowest over unders.
22 and a half. They closed 20 and a half.
That was partially me too. I feel like I was just like
Yeah.
every show I was going on, just like this team has no talent. Slam the under. There's no way this team could be good, and they're kind of good. Like Jody Fernandez is doing good stuff there. They're playing like this gimmicky, like we're always 5 out and everybody's injured, so we're gonna be more 5 out and all this stuff, and we're just gonna give the ball to Cam Thomas, and he's just gonna do stuff, and it's sort of working.
Yeah, it's very baffling. Like I'm honestly of the mind of like that front office needs to be on the phone
Right now.
This is a emergency trade of Cam Johnson immediately. Like
Yep, sell
get
high.
him out of there. He is too good. It's not even like a sell high thing. It's not an opportunity, and that's the only thing that front offices really act from, is they always act from positions of opportunity. But like you gotta move Dorian Finney-Smith. They're plus.
Oh, they're winning too many
8.1.
games. Is your point?
Yes.
Yes. The goal here is they're actually losing the season right now because they're going the opposite of what their goal is.
Like look at so right now the Brooklyn Nets are 6-9.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia 76ers are 2-12. Let's say that they improve eventually. The Wizards are 2-11. The Pelicans are 4-12. The Jazz are 3-11. They're only 2 games back in the loss column, but like every one of these is going to count if you're trying to get Cooper Flag. Like all of these are going to count.
They're going to screw up and end up in the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference. They're 8th in the East right now.
And that is a disaster with where this franchise is at after trading McHale. And it's like, look, you could be a fun team and make the play. Like if they didn't have their pick, I would get it. If they don't have their pick this year, I'd be like, yeah, sure, make the play in. I would have bet the under then. I've been like, yeah, why bother? Like this team does have some NBA talent on it. Right. But like with the position that you're in,
they traded.
You got to get a franchise guy. It's Dennis Schroeder is not your franchise guy. Cam Thomas is not your franchise guy. You're going the wrong way. But if you're just a Nets fan and you want to watch basketball every night,
it's fun.
We don't suck.
Yeah, we don't suck. They should be on the phone right now, and they should. Everybody should be on the. There's nobody untouchable. Nobody.
Everyone.
Even I love Nick Claxton. If the right offer comes in. Yeah, give us those 2 first-round picks. We'll be very happy. Thank you, Golden State Warriors or whoever trades for him. Like, so yeah, they do the Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson stuff. Finney-Smith is going to be. It's going to be shocking if he finishes the year on Brooklyn. My only question is where does he end up? Because he just seems like such a perfect fit everywhere. Lakers makes sense. Memphis, like why aren't the Grizzlies? The minute Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson go down before the season on the phone, just like, we'll take both of your wings. Here's Marcus Smart's salary and some other stuff. To me, I'm wondering why other teams haven't traded for these guys.
Yeah, it'll probably wind up being a Western Conference team that's really good, that thinks it can win a title. Like that's who it will be. Again, talking kind of from the position of opportunity rather than position of weakness. Like nobody trades when it's like, oh, my guys are hurt. Nobody does it. Nobody's like, we got to do something. They're just like, nope, I'm not trading from a position of weakness. Everyone trades from, we're really good, we can win a title, let's add one more piece. Like that's what the Suns tried to do last year with or 2 years ago with the Royce O'Neal move, right? Is like, hey, we can do this. We got KD. We got we're going to do this. Let's trade for Royce O'Neal. So I think it'll probably wind up being a Western Conference team that wants one more wing for the playoff push.
Love that Detroit doesn't suck. They're a lot of fun to watch, but let's go to our next tier.
This is fine. We're okay. We're not going to have the kind of year we were hoping to at the very best, but there's no disaster here. We're going to be fine. The Memphis Grizzlies. I guess the Portland Trailblazers, just from a people trying to keep jobs perspective, I think they should be worse. And the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks aren't awful. They're not good. They are still reprehensible against the spread. They'll sneak out some wins. They'll have some horrible losses. They're not a serious contender. They have some really good young talent. The whole thing doesn't click. They're fine. They're just fine. Memphis is, look, we have so many injuries. We've missed so many guys already again, but we're treading water. And that's all we really got to do is just tread water and hope that we get everybody back for the stretch run.
Yeah, the Grizzlies in like a couple of weeks could jump to the vibes about to shift here. Right?
Yes.
Like you start getting some guys back and it's like, oh, okay, cool. The Hawks are a really interesting team to me because the production, the record, all this stuff is fine. To your point, like they are in the. This is fine. It's fine. It's whatever. We'll probably be a playing team for the umpteenth time. It's fine. But you watch it on the court and you're like, this is way more fun than it used to be.
Yes.
Mostly because of Dyson Daniels and some of the other, Riza Shea has ended up being good. Johnson's Jalen Johnson's putting up triple doubles or close to it all these nights. And you're like, wow, we have like way more things here to play with. And all of a sudden we're like a lot less worried about DeAndre Hunter and his development. Like that's like such a like auxiliary thing where that used to be like a really important thing 2-3 years ago for Atlanta. The Trae Young thing is still a little strange. I'm still not totally sure what to think about that. All I know is I really enjoy watching Atlanta when Trae Young's not on the court. And I seem to enjoy watching it more. And I kind of feel like the players enjoy playing a little bit more too.
Just a little, but they're so bad without him. That's
know.
the weird part is like,
that's why it's so weird.
You look at the numbers and it's like, yeah, they're minus 1.7 with them on court. That's not good, but they're minus 9.6 for them off.
Get killed.
And so I always have to resist those impulses because that's how I felt honestly last year too. It's like I really liked the Hawks with DeJounte Murray when Trae wasn't on the floor, and then I would look at the numbers and it's like, no, they got obliterated in every single minute Trae didn't play.
But this version is more fun than the DeJounte Murray stuff like that last month of the year. This is like the defense. Dyson Daniels is coming for that Jalen Suggs crown of most entertaining defensive player to watch. He might already have it. It's my crown. I hand it out. I still have Suggs. He's still the guy. He still has the crown. But like Daniels is coming for it. And that's another nickname, another great nick, the Great Barrier Thief. Amazing nickname for Dyson Daniels. Amazing. He does this thing where nobody else really does it like him, where he's always guarding the lead ball handler. And every lead ball handler, like there's patterns in basketball. You come off that screen, and when you're a lead ball handler and you hit that screen snug, you just know, okay, I got that guy's gone. My defender, he's gone. He's not here anymore. I got my driving lane. We're going to the basket, baby. And that doesn't work with Dyson Daniels. He's right behind you. Even if you hit that screen snug, he's right behind you. And he's got this almost like 7-foot wingspan, these long arms, and he just comes in from behind and pokes the ball out from behind you. And you could just see these ball handlers. They're like, oh, I got snug. I got my driving lane. I'm going. Where's the ball? I don't have the ball anymore. And they look like shocked, like bewildered, like you could see it. Their eyes get wide. And Dyson Daniels has the ball, and he's going the other way with it. It's incredible. Like he spooks these guys.
That's probably the most important defensive skill in the NBA right now. Like that skill in particular is what makes teams great.
Yep. It's another reason why Jalen Suggs is great. Hey, we don't suck tier. Next tier, oh, this is fine. Okay, so we got a couple more tiers left. Let's go.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous. Like if you're a fan of this team, that should be what you're saying. It's like I'm a little nervous here. I got the Wolves, I got the Kings, I got the Spurs, I got the Pacers, and your Miami Heat.
We'll save the Heat for last. I understand the Pacers because of the Tyrese Halliburton stuff. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with them. It might be as simple as you look at the numbers before the hamstring injury and you look at the numbers after the hamstring injury from last season, at the end of last season, and they're just different. They're two different players. They're just two different players. That feels like it's a little too simplistic of an excuse, but maybe that's all it is. I don't know.
I will say this. I think that Tyrese does have to have a mindset change. If he's hurt, then he's not able to, and I can't really speak to that. It's like if you're playing, I gotta judge you. He has these games where it's like late in the game, he'll hit 3 huge 3-pointers, just absolutely clutch plays. He's not pushing pace. He's not directing things. He defers way too much.
Yep.
Like he plays like a guy who's like, yeah, I'm just like another guy. And sometimes it takes pure passers a while because like I say this off of covering Nikola, Nikola, I honestly I've had like squabbles with him because I would be like, okay, as you kind of come to become the best player on the team, and he's like, I'm not the best player on the team, and I'm like, stop it. He doesn't do it now after winning MVP, but you have to grow into that role, and I really don't think that Tyrese has. And I'm like, dude, you are the guy. Like Siakam's awesome. He's the best overall player on the team. You're the engine. You got to be the guy. And he. Honestly, my biggest thing is he just defers too much. I would rather he continue to miss shots, but be forcing it more and making more plays than this version, which is like Yeah, missed a wide open spot up 3. Yeah, missed this one. Oh, he didn't touch the ball. He didn't do anything in that quarter. That is what you can't live with. He's got to be the engine. That's what he was last year.
He
And without that, I think that's why we're seeing this big regression.
he's the thing that made that team special, right? Like
Yeah,
he's the engine, he's the unique factor of that team, and he was the identity. And the reason why the Pacers were so good last year is because they had that different identity. Like the talent was fine. It wasn't like head over heels better than a lot of the teams they played, but they got so many teams caught off guard because of how they played. And they played that way because of Tyrese Halliburton. And you're right, he does need to shoot more. He has to launch those pull-up threes. Like when he's special, that's he's doing all these things. But like you watch these games and he's just like, here you go, Benedict Mathurin. You run
yep,
up the floor with it.
yeah,
And it's like, no, you run up the floor with it and then pass it to Benedict
yeah.
Mathurin, right? Off of like a backdoor cut or whatever. And so he's not imposing that identity on the team anymore. And now they just become average, ho hum. And that's exactly what they've been. I'm a little worried about the injury stuff with Halliburton going forward. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
we're not there yet, but like, are we going to look back and be like, we should have known? He's injured again this year. He's playing most of the games, but he's hurt. He played 69 games last year, 56 games the year before that. Like, is this guy going to be a 75 game a season player the way that you kind of want your franchise player to be? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not Zion or Kawhi. Like, we're not sounding the alarms here, but it's just a little thing that I'm looking at over the next few seasons. But um, let's talk Wolves. Why are they here? What's your concern?
Last year they were so elite defensively. Like they were just
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable. They were by
Yep.
far the best team in the league defensively.
Yep. It's how they won their games.
And they're 6th this year. It's fine. Schedule adjusted. They're fine.
Okay, schedule. They're 12th in regular, not
Yeah.
defensive rating. Yeah.
They're
Okay.
like they're fine.
Yep.
Like they're fine. They're not elite. They're just fine. Their offense is better. They're 12th in schedule adjusted offense this year. They're probably better than the record. I think they're better than the record at 8-6. I think they just are better. The biggest thing for me is just it is impossible to watch these games and not be like Julius Randle does not fit. Like it just you can't like it's not that he's playing badly. He just doesn't fit. And that's not Julius's fault. They didn't to be clear, they traded Cat because of the money and DiVincenzo. That was what they wanted. And they got it. And that part works fine. They need to trade Julius Randle.
Yeah.
And they need to find some team that was sniffing around New York that was interested in taking on Randle's contract and go get all of their role players. You don't need another star. You just don't. You've got Anthony Edwards. You've got Rudy Gobert. You've got a really good cast of role players around him. You don't need this contract. You need X, Y, and Z options. You need more versatility. Go find somebody. Call Atlanta, who according to reports had already called Detroit or had called New York and had been interested, and be like, all right, you got Jalen Johnson. You're not doing anything with Onyeka Okongwu. We'll take Okongwu. We'll give you Randall. We'll give you X, Y, or Z. We'd like X, Y, or Z on your bench, like DeAndre Hunter, since Dyson Daniels is revelation. Do all that. Do that type of deal because long term, it's like they're gonna be fine. But I'm nervous just because it's like they may top out at pretty good.
Yeah. And maybe get a pick back and replenish a little bit of what they lost there too would be kind of nice. But the defensive part was my main concern, and that's what I had down on my notes here is because there's a difference between being good defensively and being elite defensively. There's a difference between okay, our defense keeps us in games and our defense wins us games. And last year Minnesota's defense won them games. They won games because of their defense and Anthony Edwards doing stuff in the fourth quarter. This year, their defense is still good, to your point, but it's not this juggernaut that's winning you games. So then, what are you? Like, how are you winning games? Or you're just going to put it all on Anthony Edwards now? Because I don't know. I don't know that that's great. And offensively, obviously, it hasn't been awesome. Edwards has been fine, but Dante DiVincenzo is off to a slow start from a shooting perspective. The Randall fit has been clunky, so they need to figure some things out there. So let's move on to the Spurs. Is your concern here Victor Wembanyama?
Yes
Victor
and no.
Wembanyama's shot plot?
Like yes and no. Like he doesn't play big enough, and everybody's talked about that. And he takes too many threes, and his shot mechanics are still wonky. I'm not surprised because I was very much like, well, we got to slow down a little bit here, guys. Like the impact stuff. Like he's still a very impactful player, and that bears out in all the numbers. But to be a structure that holds up the rest of the team is just a very different thing and takes a lot more polish than he has.
Mhm.
I think the nervousness is that there was this idea that he was going to be enough, and the rest of the team was like, hey, pretty good. And it turns out that, like, no, this is still very much the bones of a 22 win team.
Mhm.
I think Barnes and CP3 have actually been really good.
Mhm.
And I do think that one of the big things that's not talked about is how big losing Sohan was, because I think Sohan's actually the best of the other guys, the
Yep.
young guys.
Yep.
But like that happened, and so it's really like Keldon Johnson's just not a guy, and Devin Vassell, the injuries continue to be a real problem, but also like Devin Vassell's doesn't look like a hugely impactful guy. And it's the hope was that they would take a big step forward this year, and it looks like everyone was a year too early. And it's like, no, you're still gonna suck, and then you'll probably get a very good pick, and then you can, make another run at it. But like, this could be a playoff team. I don't know that that's gone because I've seen how wild that second half of the season was for them.
Mhm.
But I'm like getting close to, yeah, no, this is not going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, this one is kind of based on the expectations of everything, and I was like, I think we do tend to be a year early on this stuff, and I
Mhm.
was like looking at saying, I'm like, we're a year early, guys. Like this team still sucks. Like
Yep.
Victor Wembanyama was awesome. They're not good. They're aggressively bad. I do wish Victor Wembanyama would just go into the paint more. Like you said, it's been talked about enough, but like for somebody his size to take less than a quarter of his shots in the restricted area, to me is just insane. And I just don't want those bad habits to build up while this team is young, that you now have to like work your way through those bad habits. But look, you've got Victor Wembanyama. It's sort of like the Celtics as a team, he is as a prospect. Like there's just not a lot to like nitpick, but you can find some things. And Stephon Castle looks awesome.
Yeah, he
So
looks awesome.
that's good stuff going on for San Antonio. Let's talk about my Miami Heat here. I'm also a little nervous. it's I was a little nervous coming into the season, but more like on the denial end of the spectrum, where now I'm like fully just accepted that I always thought the window was closed, but I thought they could still be a little bit fun while the window was shut. And now I'm like, nope, you're gonna be what you were last year. Not fun to watch. Windows closed. What's next?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's tough because when they look good, you can talk yourself into it. I think
Yep.
one of the things is it used to be a few things had to go right and Miami could beat anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a lot of things have to go right, and Miami might be able to have a chance at the end if things go right versus any team.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting because I think like that flattens where it's like, look, if you can get them to an end of game situation, I think they can beat the Wolves. I think they can beat um, a team of Dallas. I think they could beat any of those kind of New York even. Like I think if
Mm-hmm.
you get them into an end game scenario where enough things have gone right that Miami can pull it off. I'm not like, yeah, they're not going to be able to figure this out and do this. They've still got that. They got the coaching and the experience and that gear, but God, it takes a lot to get them to that point. And there's so many things that can go wrong for them.
Yep.
Um, and like Bam has to be one of the biggest. And like he started, I think it's starting to turn, but like
Mm-hmm.
he's got to be one of the biggest disappointments in terms of, hey, this is finally this is going to be the year. There's a really interesting parallel with the Heat and the Nuggets in that every single year Nuggets fans are like, this is the year Jamal Murray is going to be an all-star, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, he's never done it. When's he going to make that leap? Now Bam's an all-star, but it's like it was a different bar. It was like this is the year that Bam's going to be coming in like an elite two-way player. Nope. And so if you just it really does feel like, yeah, you can get the car down the road for spurts, but you're going to have a lot of pull-offs where you got to
Yeah.
fix something and then get back on the road. You can't get down the highway with this team.
And Bam is having a specifically hard time because the main thing that the Heat wanted to do going into the year was change the offense. They were way over indexed on mid range shots. It was them in Phoenix, who we already talked about. Like they were just taking too many mid range shots to be an efficient offense. It was impossible. So they had to take a step back, almost literally, to the 3-point line, but also more shots at the rim. And so Miami went into training camp and they went in the preseason. We were going to eliminate the mid range shot, and for the most part, they have done that. They've cut their long twos in half.
Yep.
But they're not necessarily getting to the rim a lot more. They are upping the amount of 3-pointers, and that's fine. Like that's the trade-off. You have better 3-point shooters than you do have guys get into the basket. The problem is that impacted Bam the most because Bam is flirted with the 3-point shot. It was a little bit overstated. I think he made like 3 of them in the entire Olympics, and everybody's like, "Wow, Bam's a 3-point shooter." I'm like, he
Yeah.
made like 3 of them from the corner. Relax.
Yep.
He took a bunch of them in the preseason. It is there. It's there more than it ever has been for him. He's averaging like 2 or 3 a game now, but he's not spacing the floor. There's a big difference between that. And he doesn't get to the rim a lot. That's just he's not when he's going up against like true 7-foot centers. He's undersized and he has a hard time getting up, around, or over them. And so his bread and butter over the last couple of years became that free throw line mid range jumper. And Spoelstra has basically said we don't take those anymore. So now Bam's left with, well, where do I take my shots? And that's why his shot attempts are down and his numbers are all down, is because he doesn't have a sweet spot anymore. His sweet spot got taken away from him. They're allowing him to play with it a little bit more, and I think they're eventually going to go in that direction. So I'm not super worried about Bam. I think they'll just be like, you know what, you do it, and then everybody else has to take more threes and shots at the basket. But we'll see. My biggest concern with Miami is that Jimmy just doesn't have that gear anymore. And he had 30 points the other night, and I think he can do it every once in a while, like every week and a half. He can kind of look like playoff Jimmy. But for people expecting like what could be a contract year for him because he's got that option next season, and say, oh, he's going to be super engaged. There's a difference between 1-2 and can do, and he's 35 years old, and you don't really see players get healthier and better at this stage in their career. And Jimmy now, instead of having this like killer contract type of year, you just see his numbers are down across the board. He's got the worst numbers he's had in a Heat uniform, and he's already missed 4 games because of a right ankle injury. So, yeah, I think that's just the Heat.
At age 35, Dwayne Wade was on Miami or was on Chicago.
Yep. And then he came back to Miami and started coming off the bench. Like, this is that stage. I make that comparison all the time. Yeah.
And it's like age doesn't rob you of your best. It robs you of your consistency. And what happens is fans will always be like, no, he can do it. Look what he did. He just had 30. And it's like, yeah, he's going to give you, you're going to win 1 out of every 4 to 6 games where Jimmy looks like Jimmy. Mm-hmm. The problem is like you have to be able to prop up the rest of the team in the other 3 to 5. And you can't. And that's really the problem, I think, right now.
Yeah, and the lows for him is he just stands in the corner. Like he goes from like
just there
involved to uninvolved. Our expectations were I'm blowing it for you. Our next tier.
Yeah, our expectations were low, but holy bleep. Raptors, Wizards, Hornets, and Jazz. So a lot of this is like they expected. You always when franchises put you in a position for draft, it's very hard to be fun and bad enough to get a top pick. It's just very hard. This is why I always laugh. Like 3 years ago when the Rockets first had like Jalen Green, and it was like, sure, they're gonna be bad, but they're gonna be fun. And I was like, you say that now, it's a lot less fun when you get to January and you're just watching them get blown out again.
It's such a great point because you do hear this all the time, and I'm like, what's the last bad team that you were still watching in February? Like what? No, so my question to you is, of this group, who's going to be the first one knocked off your league pass rotation? Like who's the one you're looking forward to the most? You're like, I'm just not going to do it anymore unless I absolutely have to.
The last will be the Wizards because they have really fun players, and they're such a train wreck the rest of the time that you will find something entertaining. So it's like this great combination.
That clown song, like the like underneath it. So and Koulibaly is a lot of fun, and Sarr's been a little bit better than I thought. He's not been good, but he's been better than I thought.
Better. Yeah, like there's stuff there. Boy, Scotty's coming back, so it can't be Raptors because Scotty's really fun to watch.
It's the Jazz. It's got to be.
The Jazz because they have to shut down more. Now, part of this is like it was really kind of funny because there was kind of this idea of like Utah. The win totals thought Utah was going to be decent.
Yeah.
It was like 28.5. And once a bunch of us kind of got to preseason, we're like, wait, look at this roster. Because the best kind of signal, I'm a sicko. And my wife was like, who's on the Jazz? Because they were playing the Nuggets. And I was like, oh, it's Laura Markkanen. She's like, who else? I was like, oh, well, Jordan Clarkson is there and Colin Sexton. She's like, who else? And I was like, Walker Kessler. And then Keontae George. And I was like, I don't know. And I started looking at the roster. I was like, oh, there's like a lot of guys that I've forgotten about were in the league.
So that's kind of my thing with Utah is they deserve to be in this tier, but you can also put them in the I'm a little nervous tier. You could put them in like almost at the next like worst tier here. Here's my thing with Utah is the thing that you've done the last couple of years, trade away your good players for draft picks and start stocking up your assets. they don't have that many good players left to trade. Like,
Hmm.
who's really banging down the door for any of these guys that you were talking about? Like Larry Markkinen, they've already established. Like Clarkson, okay, maybe.
I think Sexton would still get. There's going to be a team who's
Mm-hmm.
like this, like that's it, that's the guy.
Right,
And
but
so
you're
I
getting
think
what? Like a top 20 protected first? Like, what are we really talking about in terms of asset management here? We're getting to the point where, all right, we're stringing together a lot of losing seasons, and fans are going to get nervous, and it's going to
yeah.
be process 2.0, and we're going to do this whole thing again. I don't know how much longer you can do this. To me, like, you're getting to the, like, to me, this is the last year. Like, this is the limit, or else you start really losing guys, especially if you're going to trade more, like, the rest of your good players away.
I think one of the things is that Keontae George, I think, has been a miss, and that's been hard. Is like he looked like he was going to be good, and he struggled.
Yeah, my stock is not doing well. I'm still holding on
No,
to it, but that's just because
yeah,
there's
like
no point
I
in
had
selling
stock
it.
too. I was like, oh, hey, he's fun.
Yep.
And then I think this works out because they look. I just feel like it was very transparent what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is like they're doing what Brooklyn should be, and Brooklyn's too good. And if you're going to tank, this is it. Because okay, you don't get Cooper Flag because there's a lot of bad teams, and you might just get screwed by the lottery. Okay, Ace Bailey,
Right.
BJ Edgecombe, like
Yep.
all of
This
these.
is the last year. This is the last year you get to do it. You do this again next year. It
So
feels like that's untenable.
maybe, but here's the question: is just like, all right, look, if things are that bad and Laurie gets frustrated, and you get to this summer, any team that's going to look for Laurie probably has a young enough player that you can probably go for it. Like if the Warriors if they don't carry through, and it's a frustrating year, and it's like we could have been good, but we got to get Steph some more help. And you go to the Warriors, and it's like you're either getting Kuminga or Pajemski. Those are two players I think they're probably going to help you. I think Moses Moody has like a lot of upside. Depending on who else like goes in for Markkanen, you're probably going to get like another young player to pair with whoever you get in the draft. And so like I think you're right that like you can't do this forever, and you can't fall into that trap. But I do think that this year selectively is okay. I think next year is probably fine. There's risk because there's always risk when you get into this of becoming who the Kings were for 20 years.
Right.
But right now, I think they're okay.
Next tier. Last tier.
Last tier. Panic at the Disco.
Here we go.
Sixers and Pelicans. I don't know what you do. The big thing with the Sixers is that Grizzlies game is, but Paul George got hurt, and Max, you have to be good enough to at least be like, yeah, it was back and forth. It was a nail biter. Grizzlies pulled it out at the end. That's not what it felt like. It
Grizzlies
felt like
in quotes.
Like the Grizzlies. It felt like it got a little close at the end. It felt like it was them the whole way. I don't know what's going on with Embiid. The quotes coming out of him, where today he's like, "I'll take the blame because it's always my fault." I was like, that's not just like I can have my issues with that from a leadership perspective. These are the quotes of somebody who's like not happy on like a personal level. And that's very concerning because what's going on there. You have to be good enough as like a surrounding structure to be all right. And they are not right now. The Pelicans, I have no, like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what you do here. You lost too many guys. I still think that a full strength team with Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy III, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, DeJounte Murray is good. If you trade Brandon Ingram for other pieces, it's better. Like that to me still exists, but we're just never going to see it. And at some point, you got to cut bait. And I just don't know if they're there. I don't know if they can be there. How do you trade him how do you trade Zion Williamson even if you wanted to? How do you get value back? How do you trade these guys?
That's why they belong in this tier, and they belong in this tier almost, I don't know, more than six, but like in a bigger picture way. It's like, is it ever going to happen for us? Because it feels like it's not this bad injury wise every year, but it's pretty bad injury wise every year at some point. And they're entering that Clippers Sixers territory of this is just sort of our destiny. Like we just get hurt, and that's it. And we're just one of these what if, shoulda, woulda, coulda teams. And it's really unfortunate because when they are healthy and good, they are so much fun to watch. Yeah. They're more fun to watch than the Clippers or the Sixers when they're at their best. They're so much fun to watch. And what they were doing in that play-in tournament against the Lakers last year, it's like it's all coming together. and then it goes away in an instant with one little landing. When Zion lands one time, and it's gone. So yeah, I don't. If you're the Pelicans, I don't know. I don't know what you do. Like the funny thing about the Pelicans is you start listing off the things that are going well, and you're like, well, Yves Missy is more ready than we thought he was going to be. That shouldn't be the top thing on the list. Like
No.
that's where you start and that's where you
But it's
end.
also like, how are it's like you can't be upset about how the guys are playing. None of them are supposed to, like,
Right.
everyone's up 3 tiers
Yeah.
of where they're supposed to be.
Yep.
But here's part of the problem too is, okay, even if they get Herb and Trey, because Trey's back, like even you get Herb and Trey back, those are guys that are supposed to be around a star.
Right.
And it can't be Ingram. It just
No,
can't be. It
he's
can't.
not that guy.
And that's like the real, if I'm a Pelicans fan, that's my nightmare, is that they reach a point where they're like, well, we can't trust Zion, so we'll just build around Ingram. And now you are last year's Chicago Bulls forever.
Right. Yeah.
And that to me is tough.
Yeah, it's bigger picture. In terms of the Sixers, we'll end it on with them there. You're right. I mean, the vibes are just really bad. Paul George has been pretty awful, and it feels like everybody's finally starting to recognize it. And what seems like a slam dunk masterpiece of an offseason feels like it's gone the other way. And my thing with Embiid now is you've got no more excuses, right? It's not, you can't point at the coaching, you can't point at the front office's burner accounts, you can't point to Ben Simmons not taking shots in the playoffs, you can't point to James Harden, you can't point at the drama from Jimmy Butler. It's you, man. Like, this was supposed to be the year where you're under contract, Maxi's under contract, you got Paul George, you flesh out the roster with Lowry and Caleb Martin and all these guys. You're the one. And when he's rolling his eyes and saying, well, I guess it's always my fault, it's like, yeah, dude, that's the job. You're a former MVP. It like, you got to have some accountability with that. And if he's unhappy and not willing to do that leadership stuff, then the whole thing just kind of falls apart. And this is looking like a bust. And it's really early, and I'm still not ready to write them off. And maybe I'm crazy, but they need to do a lot of work before they go from Panic at the Disco to Vibes Are About to Shift. Like, there's still a lot of work in between those two tiers.
I mean, I think the good news is that they can just keep Embiid engaged, and as long as he doesn't do something rash, then you're okay. Like, Daryl's going to
30 points the other night,
and Daryl's going to see it through. And my thing on Paul George, and I'll continue to say this, is, look, PG's older for sure. He's been banged up. Losing the preseason stuff really hurts a player like that, because you need the conditioning and you need all this stuff, and he's on a new team trying to like figure out how to play. So like, I don't expect Paul George to like just come in fresh off an injury on any team and drop 30. That's not who I think Paul George is in this league. I don't think it's who honestly he's ever been. He's a guy that optimizes your ceiling with synergy in terms of all the things that he can contribute in a lot of different ways, but you need to be able to build that.
Yeah.
And so like,
there's a difference though between all of, like, he's not going to come in and drop 30 and be that guy
and be awful.
What he's been. And I watched the Sixers in that Miami game right before the team meeting. I had to check the box score at the end, Matt, to just be like, did he play? Like, I didn't even know. It was like, I'm like, dude, like,
yeah. I mean, I'm not looking to buy low on the Sixers. It's very like there is this, the Bucks I think have turned it around. But they were on the Sixers and Bucks there for about a week and a half. We're in that place where you're in a wreckage of a ship and it's dropping. And there's a point where you can escape and still make it to the surface. And then there's the point of no return because you've fallen too far. And the Sixers are dangerously close to that line.
Favorite Embiid trade destination before we get off here?
Miami.
Hey, Matt, it's been fun. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks.